Welcome to the Glendale Water and Power Commission meeting of March 3rd, 2008. Our first item is the regular agenda roll call. Sheila, could we have roll?
Commissioner Ibrahimian.
Present.
Commissioner Foley.
Present.
Commissioner Miller.
Present.
Commissioner Yao.
Present.
Thank you. Next item we have here is consent items and consideration of the minutes of the last meeting, which was on February 4th, 2008. And I believe there was a correction to those minutes, Pat? Correct.
At the very end, it says the next meeting will be February 4th, when in fact it's March 3rd.
Okay. With that correction, is there a motion to accept the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. The minutes are hereby accepted for February 4th, 2008. Our next item is introductions. The ratepayers will be very pleased to know, if they haven't learned already, we have a new general manager. And I believe that, Dan, you'd like to make an introduction, or...
Actually, rather than my making the introduction, why don't I let Mr. Steiger introduce himself and tell you whatever he wants to tell you about his background.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Just press there, I think.
Thank you. And it's really a pleasure to be here. I truly mean that. A little bit about my background. I've been in the power and water business for about 38 years. I'm a graduate civil engineer. I have a master's degree. I'm a licensed professional engineer. Spent a good portion of my career in the electric utility industry back in New Jersey, about 29 years, both with investor-owned utilities and with an electric co-op. And in fact, it was the years that I spent with New Jersey's only electric co-op that really gave me the love for the co-op public power side of the business. So that was very, very effective. I was very much involved in restructuring in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And then about 9 years ago, relocated to Arizona, where I spent a few years in private practice, and again was instrumental in some restructuring work in Arizona. Did an awful lot of work on the regulatory side and for demand response and demand side management programs in Arizona, a lot here in California. And then in 2003 took over as the manager of the energy department for the Imperial Irrigation District here in California. Spent 3 years there, enjoyed that immensely. There's an awful lot of potential in Imperial. And then I was made an offer I couldn't refuse back in 2005, 2006, and was lured back east, back to Massachusetts, and I was general manager of the Massachusetts Municipal Wholesale Electric Company, better known as MWEC, which is the joint action agency for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, responsible for power supply for 40 municipal systems, similar to Glendale, but in most cases smaller. And here I am, and enjoying it very, very much. Really looking forward to working with the city, yourselves, and the customers here in Glendale.
Well, thank you very much. I think this is the first time any of the commissioners have had the opportunity to meet you, and I think it might be appropriate for us to introduce ourselves, maybe say when you got on the commission and what your role is.
My name is Patrick Foley. I've been on the commission for about a year and a half. I'm presently the secretary. I'm in private practice doing environmental and toxic tort law here in Los Angeles and the whole Southern California area. And welcome.
Thank you.
I'll introduce myself last. Go ahead, Ed.
Ed Ibrahimian. I've been on the commission for a year now. I lived in the city of Glendale since 1977. I work with City of Los Angeles. I'm the director of Bureau of Street Lighting in the City of Los Angeles. And very happy to have you on board.
Thank you.
And I'm Hugh Yao. I work for Southern California Gas Company. I've been with the company for over 12 years now, and I have a background in chemical engineering with a PE in mechanical engineering and an MBA from USC. And I've been on the commission for about 5 months.
Thank you.
I'm John Miller. I've been on the commission now for about a little over a year and a half, and my fellow commission members did the honor of electing me to the presidency just a few months ago. I currently work for the City of LA Department of Water and Power. I work in the aqueduct section. I had for many years worked in water quality and also in construction engineering. Anyway, thank you, and it's a real pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you.
At this point, we have a commemoration we'd like to present to former Commissioner Dellinger, and I have something to read here. I guess the way to handle this is I'll read it, and then we have the plaque. Okay. Commissioner Dellinger, Scott Dellinger, has served on the Commission since June 14, 2005. He has served as Secretary of the Commission from November 2005 to December 2006. In January 2007, he served as President for 1 year. Scott has contributed his personal time in studying reports and information to be fully apprised of the operations and facilities of Glendale Water and Power. He has provided valuable advice and recommendations on the expansion of the water recycling system, the PBC program, levels of service, and methods of operation. Scott, would you like to come up?
Well, Scott, I'd like to present this. We've only been involved for about 10 months that I was interim general manager, but one of the things I want to really specifically highlight is the support I got from you and from this commission on the water rate increases that we moved through the City Council this year. And I think the fact that both yourself as president and Commissioner Miller appeared at the council meetings and testified in support of it was really a big help, and I think we accomplished a lot for the for water and power and the water system. So with that, I'd like to present you with this plaque and give you an opportunity to talk for 15 or 20 minutes.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the podium. I actually did prepare a 20-minute speech, but I'll try and condense it to 1 minute or less. It has been a great pleasure to serve the citizens of Glendale, and I would like to say thank you to everyone in this room here, as well as the City Council that put me into the commissioner position, and the citizens of Glendale. This has actually been one of the associations that I've truly enjoyed being a part of more than any other of all that I've been involved with, whether they're fraternal or social or whatnot. And that's because it really is something that is in my own interest personally and professionally, and I'm happy to have been a part of it. I've taken great pride in it, and I truly have enjoyed it. I've enjoyed serving the citizens. I've enjoyed meeting everybody, knowing each and every member of the commission board personally, but never in violation of the Brown Act. And I'm looking forward to being on this side of the podium and continuing to serve the citizens of Glendale. I still have a house in Glendale. I am a scout leader, and in fact took a Cub Scout group up to the top of the Verdugo Hills. So I will continue to be plugged into the city of Glendale and continue to serve the citizens and the members of the Glendale Water and Power Department. That I'd just like to say thank you very much once again.
Well, thank you, Scott. I'd like to add a personal word of gratitude towards you. Scott mentored me in my early months here and gave me a lot of good information about the commission and how it works, and he set an excellent example. And I just wanted to let you know of my gratitude to you personally for that. Anyway. Our next agenda item are reports and information, and I think at this point I should turn it over to Director Steiger.
Okay, I think I'd like to ask Ramon to come up.
Good afternoon, President Miller, members of the Commission. To have two-part report. The first part report, as always, every month I report about the outages that we had the previous month since we had the meeting. For the month of February, we had 3 outages. None of them really are significant, but they're all related to the wind problems or the wind situation that we had last month. The one that I want to point out and focus on is we actually had a major scare. That might be a strong word, but one of the outages we had was on February 14th, Valentine's Day, and guess what it was? Mylar balloons. And we thought it happened early in the day, that it's windy, and with all the Mylar balloons during that period, we were actually concerned that we might be dealing with a lot more outages than the one that we had. So, and the reason I'm pointing that out is there is some movement going on at the state level where we're trying to petition, along with Burbank, different ways of handling Mylar balloons, not necessarily to make them illegal, at least make people more aware of the problems every time they release Mylar balloons into the air. But anyway, again, we only had 3 minor outages last month, better than what we did in January. If you recall, January we had 14 different outages, but February was a good month for us. So unless there's any questions, I'd move on to the next part.
I would like to comment, and we've offered gratitude and congratulations in the past for the increased reliability you've provided through your program. And I believe this was an item in the last strategic plan that Ignacio Troncoso worked on to increase reliability, and it's impressive that we've been able to continually do that. I think that deserves attention here at this meeting, and thank you for that.
Well, thank you. That's really with staff. Everyone's really very concerned, and they are really working hard towards minimizing the outages that we have.
I do have a question on the Mylar balloons. At the state level, what was being considered?
There's some lobbying going on at this time,
Okay.
and basically there's not much activity, but we started the lobbying process.
Thank you for that.
Next part, last time we were here, I made a presentation on our capital improvement programs. And President Miller asked, we have capital improvement programs, what are we doing with respect to maintenance in the electric system? And that's what I'm here to present to you.
Excellent.
So basically, there are a few general categories that we use for maintenance, one of them being preventative. This is the same thing as you do with your cars, where once in a while, or depending on the mileage, you take it in for oil change, for lubrication, check your brakes. That's a preventative. I'll go into details as we go through the presentation. There's some corrective maintenance. That's if after inspection or if there's an equipment that has gone through a severe condition or overloading condition, we may take some action to make sure that there's nothing that's gone wrong with the equipment or device. And then there's several inspection programs that we do. We have visual inspection, where we call it windshield on power poles, where our inspector can actually just drive by, look through the windshields, or they can do walk by, or through instruments. That's gauges on the equipment. There's detailed inspection, which comprise cleaning, dusting, checking for loose connections, and so forth. And then when we come to testing, there's diagnostic testing, where we're actually using instruments to verify how the equipment is responding to a specified standard. We may go into some timing requirements, especially with circuit breakers, where timing is down to the milliseconds. There's predictive maintenance, where based on milestones, the number of operations, and based on recommendations by manufacturers, corrections that we can do or inspections we can do on the device. Then there's also what we call non-intrusive and intrusive testing. Non-intrusive testing includes all testing that we do on the transformers, circuit breakers, as well as using infrared cameras. These are things that we don't interrupt service. We actually are performing testing either from a distance or without interrupting service. And then there's intrusive testing. Intrusive testing involves either moving, in case of poles, or field devices, actually moving the equipment, taking it out of service, or taking some samples for a more detailed analysis. And general guidelines that we use is we follow industry standards for substations as well as our transmission and distribution equipment. We follow the manufacturer's recommendations as to how often we should do any of the inspection or testing that we should do, or as needed. The as needed portion really applies to a lot of the equipment that we have because they have age, they have a lot of mileage, so to speak, a lot of operations on them. So we may do a lot more inspection or repairs on this equipment. That would be depending on the number of operations any overloading or any overheating that may have experienced during unusual conditions. Inspections, when we find field conditions that don't make sense, we might do some corrective actions. Again, aging based on the number of years of service or number of operations. But old does not mean bad, by the way. We still have a lot of equipment that may have not been loaded significantly, meaning we didn't put too much current through them, that they may be old, but they may still be good. Okay. There's a general order that was released by the California Public Utilities Commission, which is the General Order number 165. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but in 1996 or thereabouts, when AB 1890 was released as part of deregulation, there was a major concern about reliability of the power system. So the Public Utilities Commission of California basically established an order that sets the minimum requirements for inspection, testing, and rating of equipment. This is as a result, if you recall, back in 96, in August of 96, 7 states were out of power at one time. I don't know if you recall that back in August of 96. As a result of that, this order was released in conjunction with the standards for overhead and distribution constructions, the GO 95 and GO 128. GO 165 was issued by the Public Utilities Commission. It's not mandatory for municipally owned utilities or publicly owned utilities. This was targeted mainly for the IOUs, such as San Diego Gas and Electric, PG&E, and Southern California Edison. We're not mandated, but we use this standard as a guideline. It defines the inspection cycles for the different equipment, overhead and underground. Basically, the recommendation is there should be at least one visual inspection per equipment per year. And if it's overhead, it should be detailed inspected once every 5 years. For underground devices, it should be once every 3 years, detailed inspection.
Excuse me, Ramon.
Sure.
So even though GO 165 doesn't apply to POUs, we're still following the same guidelines? Or is that a separate one for the CEC that mandates all the POU to follow?
We follow the guideline for one reason only. It really is more for what's the word I'm looking at? It's mainly for the benefit of our utility. If we do have an accident or an incident, we can say that we are following this standard. The other reason is, although we are not under the jurisdiction of the PUC, they still come here and do their inspection at least once every 3 years. And what we have to demonstrate is we're following some standards that is acceptable to the PUC. Okay. The last time we were inspected was April of 2007. That was last year. And during that inspection, they did not find any corrections, and they were very happy with the documentation that we have pursuant to GO 165. And that's the main reason we do that. If we get inspected, we have to show them that we are following some inspection cycles.
Is that the only authority that inspects the city, or is there some other inspectors that come by?
That's the only authority that have come and inspect us. Although they have really no authority over us, they still come and inspect. But CEC, the California Energy Commission, is also trying to get into the reliability issues that most utilities are having. I don't know where they are. They sent some new requirements. We haven't seen the final version. And whether or not we'll be mandated by that, it's still up in the air. Okay. But with the General Order 165, key really here is documentation. We have to be able to demonstrate that we are doing due diligence, we're doing inspection, we're doing testing as needed. For example, on our overhead systems, we have the power poles. On the power poles, we have cross arms, we have wires, we have capacitors, transformers. We have a lot of devices attached to these poles. And what we do, although not mandated by GO 165, is every time we touch a pole, we go through an inspection. We have a checklist, and we keep that on file to show that for at least a year to show that we have inspected that. Okay. And the intrusive inspection, we do that on an as-needed basis. When we find there's something we need to do, we do an intrusive testing. And corrective actions are done right away, except I have to use that as an exception is, in 2004, we actually hired a consultant. We have over 15,000 poles. The consultant came in and inspected every single pole that we have in our system. We found several major problems and several minor problems. We have fixed all the minor problems, not all the major problems, because a lot of it is going to be part of our reconstruction project for 12 kV. So the strategy that we created is since they're part of reconstruction, as we reconstruct, we do all the major correction as we go through it, so we only touch it once. And for the underground, the main component of our underground system is really our vaults. We have a lot of system through vaults, and we have a procedure in place that every time we go in to a vault, we have a checklist. We do infrared testing. We check for conditions of every equipment that's in that vault, and again, that's recorded, and we have a database that we use to track that. So there are two components in our system. We have the substations, and we have transmission and distribution. I have addressed pretty much what we do with the T&D, with the underground and overhead inspection using GO 165. Substations is where we have a lot of investment. I mean, we have 12 substations in the system, and we have major transformers, circuit breakers, and everything is connected to. It's the main component of our delivery system for electricity. And some of the programs that we have a level 1, which is a visual inspection, where basically once a month we go through and do a visual check. We check for mechanical condition, whether paints are cracking, if there are any leaks on the oil. Check the gauges. Transformer gauges have, basically, it records the hottest temperature that it's recorded. We want to make sure that none of that exceeds the standard that we follow for loading. And we also do thermal scanning, which is an infrared. I have several samples of what we do with the infrared scanning. Level 2 is preventative. This is where circuits are actually de-energized. We might open cubicles, do some cleaning, do some dusting, do some lubrication of moving parts. This is the actual thing that I talked about when you take your cars in every so often for maintenance. Make sure nothing major happens to your car. You want to get as much mileage as you can out of your equipment. Level 3 is when we actually do a general overhaul. General overhaul, we follow industry standards as well as manufacturer's recommendations depending on how many operations the devices or equipment have gone through. Most importantly here is for our transformers, if after summer we do an overloading of the transformer, in other words, we load it more than 100% for a long period of time, maybe 150% to meet the load requirement without creating an outage, those transformers may go through a more detailed testing after the summer. An example of the programs that we have to show this in detail are oil testing and infrared. Let me just show you some examples of the test results. So hopefully you'll get an appreciation of what we do. Once a year, we would have every devices that we have that has transformer oil, and what we get is it's an annual report, but this thick with every device. It comes with this binder and basically a CD that shows details on this. What's important about the oil testing is, let me point out the top portion of this. This gives us all the information that we need to know about our devices. It tells us where it is, what substation it's in, what the designation. In this case, it's number 2 transformer, our Montrose substation, and it provides power to feeders 2 and 4. And this tells you who the manufacturer is and when the date of manufacturing is. This top portion of the report has visual inspection as well. It tells us where the bushings are clean, the paint, whether it's in good condition or bad condition, and if there are any leaks with the oil, whether or not it needs attention. So this first part is really a visual, including the oil. They take a clear look at the sample that they take from the oil and see whether or not there's discoloration. as an indication of there might be some contamination or overheating. Most important part of here is that a recommendation if they find anything that's out of the ordinary. And then the bottom portion this is where we spend a lot of time, try to focus on. This tells us pretty much everything we need to know about the transformer. They perform a test called gas chromatography, which analyzes the oil for combustible contents as well as byproducts of overheating. I'll give you some more examples of that. What we look for here is the volume of the different gases that get formed in the oil and any sudden change that would tell us that something has gone awry with the transformer. And this gives us the date. As you can see, there's history. So we can tell every year how this transformer is performing. Let me give you an example of a recent experience we had on our number 10 Tropico. This is the transformer. In that report for gas combustibles, you can see here that the numbers from 05 to 06 went up and went up significantly again, more than doubled from 06 to 07. When these test results came out, this was a flag for us that we need to take a look at the transformer. We took the transformer out, did some testing, but at that point we did not find anything wrong with it. In the summer, when we're having our hot season, running this transformer higher than its 100% capacity, all the gauges were starting to show that we have problems with the transformer. There's a sign of overheating. Unfortunately, we couldn't take it out of service until after the summer load was over. We did the testing right immediately after the summer. It showed that we have a lot of gases forming inside the transformer, and we followed this recommendation from our vendor saying, basically, take this out of service now before it fails. So this is a preventative measure that we take in the transformer. And what we found there, going back to the transformer, inside the compartment is a low tab changer, and it's normally soaked in oil. And after we empty out the oil, it looks nice and clean. But in here, on that corner here, I'll focus on that, there's actually a problem. As you can see here, it's deteriorating. There's some problems there where it's actually a source of a high point or a hot spot, we call a hot spot. And if you look at that even closer, the contacts are no longer making good contacts, it's carbonized. Actually, I have that sample here, so. Don't touch it with your white shirt. What we're looking for in electric systems basically make sure that we have good solid contacts. So there's just a closer picture of that. And the part that failed, as you can see, it's completely carbonized and deteriorated from the high heat.
No, Ramon, is that due to manufacturer defect or is it something else?
It's just, these are moving parts. As you can see, it's copper, and sometimes they get caught. And during the abrasion, there's some movement there. And that's the things that we have to watch out for. I wish I could call it a manufacturer's defect. Unfortunately, I can't. This transformer has been operating since 2003, I believe. So it's been 5 years. So
and just to reiterate, this was determined during preventive.
Yes.
Okay.
This is the benefit of doing the transformer oil testing that we do. We're able to catch problems before they fail. These are red flags. Mm. The other non-intrusive testing that we do is the infrared testing on our devices. This is basically taking an infrared camera and taking pictures of connections to see what they look like with respect to the environment as well as the system right next to it. In this particular example, this is a bus connection in Howard Substation, where if you look closely on that face that's overheating, as you can see, that part, that component, compared to the other two faces, is lighting up bright. And what that tells us is this program we use to locate what we consider hot spots. We look for loose connections, and the whole goal of this is to do corrective measures, make corrections before they fail. As you know, in previous outages, we would report that something failed, overheated. These are the causes of that. It's loose connection that may have been due to vibration, or when we load the system, the heating and cooling, causes the loose connection to occur. And we use that not only for buses. I'm sorry, in this particular example, like I said, phase A was pretty hot, and this is the data that we get from the actual report. Gives us the temperature difference between the phase that's failing versus the other two phases, which are normal. And the recommendation we follow is replace or repair. And what we do is we take this out of service until the such point that we can get to it. And this is just another example inside a substation where this is the insulator that you see. On top of that is a connector, that what we're calling a hot connection. Again, take that out of service, that means there's a loose connection. Speaking of insulation, the other thing that we do is we do what's called insulator washing or hot washing. The insulators inside the substation, as well as transmission line, we do it twice a year inside the substation and once a year for our 69 kV. This insulator has what's called a creepage distance. It tracks the surface of the insulator from the hot down to the ground. And every time we have contamination on the surface, it creates a phenomenon called arcing. Or the current, due to voltage, starts tracking, basically rendering this insulation useless. So what we want to do, what we do with this is we do what's called hot washing. And what it is we have invested into this equipment that we have, where we use distilled water, high pressure, about 650 psi. It's on a boom, gets up to the insulator, and actually hot wash the insulators. Again, that prevents any arcing or any failure on our overhead systems. And we have a lot of contamination here in Glendale, just coming off the freeway. The PM10s, all that stuff that accumulates over and actually attaches to the insulation. The other program that we have is what we call the Transformer Information Load Management Program. What we do on a quarterly basis is we look at all our transformers on poles, inside the vaults, and look at how they're loaded. And every spring, about this time, is we look at the replacement program, looking at the worst case condition based on what the predicted peak will be for the summer. We use this program on a feeder by feeder basis and distribute the load, what we expect the transformer would be loaded as, and do a replacement. We started this this will be our third year in doing an active replacement before the summer. If you recall, the last 2 summers we barely had any problems with our transformers due to high loading. This year, based on the predicted peak and where the circuits will be, we estimate about 355 transformers will be loaded about 125% or greater. What we want to focus on are transformers that we loaded at least 150% and higher and replace them before the summer hits. This eliminates or prevents unnecessary outages due to transformer overloading. If you've been reading about the LA dilemma every summer on transformers, that's what we're trying to prevent here. So we have a lot of programs in place, but we're still not there yet. What we don't have is a software-based asset management system that would help us proactively track and monitor the status and condition of our equipment and devices. We don't have yet a shared database, and visibility and reporting is all manual at this time. And we're hoping at some point that we can automate that. We're looking at the GIS, the Geographic Information System, that we're trying to develop, so we have a built-in database and use that for our tracking as well as reporting. That's what I have on maintenance program. Is there any questions?
Go ahead.
Ramon, I just have a quick question. You said there are 104 total to be replaced between now and summer? There's
104, yes.
104 transformers will be replaced between now and summer.
That's correct. That's 104 out of about 11,000 distribution transformers that we have.
And you've already started replace?
That's correct. We issued the work order about 3 weeks ago. And what the crew is doing is they're using that as a filler between major projects. They're trying to get to it. And the deadline for meeting that is the end of May. So we're giving ourselves a lot of time to get to it.
And are those transformers new transformers or refurbished?
Some of them are new. One of the challenges that we have, no offense to some of our customers, but there are new loads that are getting added to our circuits that we don't know about. Included in that is every time somebody buys a new plasma TV, the HD TV, all the new electronic devices are actually adding load. Plus, if you recall last summer, we were very concerned with the window air conditioning systems that got installed over the last 2 years. We still don't know where they are, or we haven't located. And some of the increased loads are the ones that we don't know about. So when we size the transformers, we size it for what we know. So.
Thank you. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Please, or go ahead.
With the substations, how many substations are there?
We have 12 distribution substations and two switching stations and 2 receiving stations, a total of 16.
With regard to the preventative maintenance, like the level 1, 2, and 3, how much manpower is involved in, for example, level 1, the monthly?
We are using 2 different groups to do part of that. We have what we call the substation electrician group, as well as the test technicians that does that. We are trying to keep up with it. The monthly inspection is being done regularly. It's a detailed inspection depending on their experience. Sometimes gets skipped, but we're catching up right now.
So is there a crew that's assigned just to do the level 1? Okay.
That is correct. That's part of a monthly assignment that they have before they do any work.
And how long has that been in place that they've been doing that?
Ever since the utility, I suppose. I have records that dates back in the 80s.
Thank you.
Yeah, I noticed in the last slide of your presentation that the total amount of transformers anticipated to be replaced is based on 336 megawatt peak. What have you done any scenarios where what if it's higher than that? Maybe we get really sustained heat wave where the peak is much higher. And I was going to maybe suggest some of the future meetings that we would look at power supply and demand. But for your maintenance program, have you considered maybe modeling scenarios where it's a higher peak where you have to replace more transformers?
Yes, we did. Actually, the model was done at 350, but realistically, we don't expect it to get that high. That's why I'm using 336.
Okay. So I just want to maybe get reassurance, or even for the public to be reassured that during the summer where there's a sustained heat wave that we are reliable and we can meet, that there won't be any blackouts. So that's why I'm just asking the question, if we're doing all we can to make sure that there won't be any blackouts.
We're doing everything we can, but I still do not guarantee that there won't be any power outages. Being frank, there's a lot of unknowns sometimes that happen. So,
Ramon, you mentioned about an asset management system in your final slide. Is there a schedule for developing those next steps?
Yeah, the first step, we actually have a master plan for a GIS system for electric. It's that we're evaluating, working with a consultant. We're working with the IS department to get that going. We're in the first phase of that, which is to get the master plan, get all the database together, and get all our mapping systems together.
Is this part of the capital improvement plan?
Yes, it is.
Is there a particular date when the project might be completed that's been identified yet?
We are looking for the next 3 years to get this project going. There's a lot of legwork that we have to do with our database, getting them interconnected, so they're all talking to each other. Right now we have databases, but they're all independent of each other.
Skipping to another topic, do you anticipate that your capital improvement plan will alter your O&M schedule as you showed it here, or will it remain more or less the same?
I believe it will be more or less the same. There's really not much we could do with the maintenance. We have to keep an eye on our system.
Okay. Do we have any knowledge of what an optimal preventive maintenance program would be as opposed to corrective? Obviously, you need both. Is there some investment in preventive that could keep the corrective at a minimal amount, or do we know that? Is it something we have to guess at?
Well, it's more than a guess. We really are working towards a more intelligent maintenance program that we can work on. Right now, it's like you say, we're more reactive than proactive, but I believe we're getting closer to being proactive. As we do a lot of upgrades to our system, We're installing more intelligent devices that we can talk to. We can interrogate it better.
These would be continuous monitoring devices.
That is
communicate.
correct.
Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent.
But one of the capital improvement programs that we have, minor as it is, we're actually putting fault recorders in our key substations that we give us a better picture of what's happening every time there's an event.
Okay. And then finally, on the unknown loads that you mentioned that are in the system, is there any way for the power system to get some kind of knowledge as to where those loads are coming from?
Once we do AMI, the automated metering system, we probably should be able to locate those.
It was an excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please.
I just want to add one thing. Commissioner Yao's question on our compliance with the CPUC standards, in that we don't, we're not jurisdictional, so we don't have to, but it is good practice to do so. And we are actually subject to NERC compliance. And I think this will serve us well to comply with the CPUC standards, because the NERC compliance standards have some pretty significant penalties built into them. So I think it puts us in a good place.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next item here, I think, is on the water.
Yes. Pat?
Afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Pat Hayes, Principal Civil Engineer. The Administrator, Peter Kavunas, couldn't be here today, sends his regrets. He's actually in Washington, D.C., doing an annual trip for lobbying efforts with the two senators and the representative. So we hope that's a fruitful trip. He has some very significant meetings lined up for the support of our water infrastructure. I apologize, I have a cold, so if I have to divert for a coughing fit, please bear with me. We have a couple things to discuss on our agenda. The first is an update on the water conservation. Tina Hartunian from our GWP Water Conservation Group is going to speak about that.
Second to get set up here. Mr. President, members of Commission, hello. My name is Atina Hartunian, and I'm the Assistant Public Benefits Coordinator for PBC programs. I'm here to give you a brief update on our water conservation efforts. According to our January report, we are yet another step closer to reaching our 10% water conservation goal. According to our report, our customers reduced their water usage by 9.2% compared to our base month, as you could see from the chart. Although we are closer to our goal, we're still targeting residential and property management and homeowners associations in order to emphasize landscaping and water usage outdoors. For residential customers, we had our March source newsletter filled with water conservation tips for the outdoors, such as fixing sprinklers and adjusting them so they don't water walkways and sidewalks and driveways. We're also in the process of sending customers reminder letters with tips. It's actually, the tip page includes low-cost and no-cost tips that customers can use to reduce their water conservation outdoors. Peter Kavunas and I will also be meeting with the residential group called the Green Team, which is comprised of about 50 to 75 residential customers who meet with other residential groups and share energy and water conservation tips. And so we're meeting with them, I believe it's March 17th, we'll be distributing information on water conservation and literature so they could also distribute it to other groups. We are also offering our residential customers free landscape classes in April and May that will help them plant drought-tolerant plants in their gardens. And we will be including bill inserts and bill messages on water conservation in customer bills starting next month. To reach property management and homeowners associations, we're also sending them a reminder letter with the same low-cost and no-cost tips that they could share with their residents. And we are also offering professional landscaping classes to homeowner association landscapers, and that'll just teach them also how to plant drought-tolerant plants in the common areas, common landscaped areas of these properties. The reason we're targeting these two groups is since about 70% of the water is consumed by these two groups, it's important that we remind them that, even though it does rain, we still need to continue our water conservation efforts. So that's mainly why we're contacting these two groups at the moment. So that is about it. If you have any questions.
Yes, Ms. Horotunian. I think last month's meeting, I was mentioning how if we should break up the water usage presentation into residential and commercial, and maybe residential between apartment buildings and individual houses. Isn't there a way we can break that up, since now we've had the 2 months bill that you mentioned, because we didn't have the commercial customers were billed monthly, whereas the residential customer were bi-monthly. So now that we have that bi-monthly bill, isn't there a way we can maybe present how we can see the difference between residential and commercial customers and on the water usage?
Okay, we can break that up for the next month. The reason we are targeting residential, though, is single-family residential for their landscape use, and the property management companies and homeowners associations for their common landscape use as well. But so apartment building owners, we are contacting them via letters and the stickers that they can put in the common areas, but we can break down the presentation where you could see their usage in different groups.
Do we anticipate the residential customers still using more than the commercial customers?
Yes, they are.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. Next on our agenda was to cover an important aspect of our water system infrastructure. We have about 400 miles of distribution and transmission pipelines within the city, and the only way we can control that system is with a series of valves that are distributed throughout the system. We have over 7,000 valves in the Glendale network, and it's important that those valves be regularly exercised. That term seems a little strange when you're talking about a valve, but basically it means open and close it a few times to make sure it's actually working. Residents will have a series of valves in their homes. If they look underneath their water cabinet or behind their toilet, they'll find a little valve there, and those also should be exercised regularly. If you can't get that valve to turn, it means it's stuck, and it shouldn't be turned because likely you're going to break it. We have the same exact problem in the water system. Except the valves are much larger and much more expensive. The valves range in size from 4 inches up to 30 inches. And in fact, we have some few 36-inch valves that have failed and are very expensive to replace. It's the nature of these valves, however, because of the buildup of incrustations, that if we regularly turn them, we're able to extend their life almost indefinitely. So to that end, and I think you've got copies now of the second quarter report. The graphic that's situated on that is actually a view of a portion of our system showing the valves and a valve exercising program we have underway. We've contracted with a firm called iWater, who specializes in this sort of work, as well as logging, GPS locating, and the like. I'd like to invite our water system operations supervisor, Mike Romanito, up. He's been running this contract. I'll give you a little bit of an update on how this contract is going. Mike?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Like Pat said, we've got a contractor on board that's helping us turn our valves. Basically, the contract was for them to come out and turn 3,500 valves and GPS locate the valves and our fire hydrants, which really helps. Like at night in emergencies, we'll be able to, the troubleshooting trucks will have laptops in them, and we'll be able to go out to a location at night, and it'll tell us within a meter where the valve is at to isolate a certain part of the system. The contract right now is for $217,000 for them to come out and turn half of the system. So we wanted them to GPS the whole system, then we realized that it wouldn't be much more of a cost if they were going to GPS the second half of the system to go ahead and turn those valves too. So once this contract is over, they're going to continue on with the rest of the city. The valves we selected for them to start with are basically on the west side of town. Those valves haven't been, they haven't been turned in the longest amount of time. That's why we started in that area. And each one on the paper, the handout you have dated January 28th, each one of those squares represents a page of our Atlas book. So what they're doing is they're just going through page by page and turning the valves, and they'll call me in the morning when they get into town and let me know they're here and what page they're going to be working on. That way we make sure that pumps aren't running in the areas that they're going to be working. They also keep track of the broken valves, which they've been on board for 6 days. They've turned 232 valves, and they've come across 7 of those 232 that are broke. So it's nice to have an electronic record, and when we have time, we'll prioritize the valves that need to be repaired, and we'll get them repaired. Also, when this contract is over, we have budgeted for a second valve truck, and so we can try and keep up with it in the future. Usually a valve exercising program is the first thing to suffer when there's staffing issues, which is what we had, so that's the reason we fell behind. Unless there's any questions.
On your January 28th map, you have unable to locate 126 valves.
Right.
What does that mean? You just can't find them, or?
When the contractor went out, they physically had somebody go out, walk the streets with a GPS pack and locate each valve that was on our map. There was 126 of those 3,451 that were on our map that they couldn't find in the streets. So we sent crews out and realized that some of our mapping was inaccurate, or some valves had been paved over during paving contracts. So the contractor also located and raised those valves that needed to be raised.
So I have a quick question. I guess I came to the commission maybe after this program was approved, but could you give me an idea is this an O&M program or a GIS program, or what type of program is it?
O&M.
O&M?
Yes.
So this project was supposed to give us an idea of where the valves are, or the valves need to be fixed, and we'll ultimately fix them like Ramon's electric program, where we just maybe be on a routine preventive maintenance type.
Right, and then eventually we'll get to them. When the contractor's done with their work, our plan is to stay on top of this information and turn them biannually. So there's about 7,000 valves in the system. We figure if we can keep a man busy all year round, we work about 240 days a year. If we can turn 15 to 20 valves a year, we should be able to keep up with our numbers and meet our goal.
So we're going to be using internal man hours instead of a contractor in the future. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, once we're caught up.
Okay.
And everything is GPS located, and going to make it a lot easier.
In terms of fixing the valves, you mentioned, I believe, they're already after 6 days, you've identified, I believe, 7 valves that needed to be repaired. When is it anticipated they would be repaired?
Depending on the importance of the valve.
Yeah.
Some of them are just rounded dummy nuts, which are real easy to fix. Some of them will involve a shutdown. If there's another valve in the area that can do the same thing and won't put very many people out of water, that's going to be a low priority valve.
Right.
But it's going to be an ongoing. We're going to be trying to follow the contractor basically and catch up.
So it'll be within a period of months, say, after the discovery, that you'll be fixing the valves?
I would say that's accurate,
okay.
Yes.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Part of the issue with the valves, if you look on the second quarter report on page 8, we have a historic vacancy rate. And from that, you can see, going back to July '05, due to retirements and injuries, we had a lot of vacancy in the water operations group, which one of the outcomes of that was an impact on the valve turning capability. We need to turn about 3,400 valves, 3,500 valves a year. And the current circumstances, as you can see from that chart, are that we are almost back to full staffing. And in the first half of the fiscal year, we turned over 1,600 valves. So we're on a good start to being meeting those performance goals. An interesting comparison about the value of this contract. The GPS locating is a pretty important thing. This is the first time we've actually truthed them with what's on the GIS. And some of them are right on, which is, by luck, I think, the way they've turned out. And other ones are as much as 20 feet or 30 feet off. So we'll be able to now make those corrections and get the GIS more accurate. And that's an iterative process, much like painting a bridge that's never done. So this is a big step in that direction. The second is the value of this contract is under $220,000. You may recall about a year ago on Doran near Glendale Avenue, we had a valve replacement project. That replaced 4 valves for a cost of about $290,000. It costed less than $100 to exercise a valve, and those large diameter valves can be $40,000, $50,000 or more a pop to replace if we don't keep them in shape. So it's a very good value for the money. Thank you. Next up, I'm sure you're all anxious to hear, how is the Chevy Chase 968 Reservoir Replacement Project? And I'd like to ask our project manager, Gary Repke, to come up and give you a little presentation on that. Gary?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. We started this project, went to construction on January 10th. That's the date we issued the notice to proceed, and that was the day the contractor actually got started in the field. We removed the trees by January 31st, which was a drop-dead deadline that we had to make, so we didn't run into the nesting birds problem, which started the next day. So we've got all the trees down. The demolition of the existing reservoir started on February 4th. And that's basically where we're at today. We're still demoing the reservoir. The demolition is to be completed in mid-March. A week from today, we're anticipating starting the installation of the temporary shoring for the walls. Construction of the pump station is supposed to commence the first part of April. And April 11th, the soil cement work for the subbase will be started also. The construction of the north cell of the reservoir will start the first part of June. Our community outreach has been working very well. We have a public relations firm on board that's making face-to-face contacts in the canyon. We sent out construction notices to the residents. We have 2 electronic signs in the canyon, one at Harvey, well, it's just north of the freeway overcrossing, and one up at the fire station. And we keep that up to date as far as what the residents can anticipate happening at the construction site. Such as when demolition started, we told them that there was going to be some noise, and when we started actually hauling out the debris, we told them that, to expect trucks, and so we're trying to keep them informed as far as what's going on. A week from Wednesday night, we have our first public meeting at the Chevy Chase Country Club. It's in conjunction with the Chevy Chase Estates annual homeowners group meeting, and we also have a website up and running specifically for this project, and we're updating that on a weekly basis. To date, we've had 1 resident with a noise complaint, and I heard another one today, so we've got two. Overall, the community residents up there have been supportive of the project. They just want to know if we can do something about the noise, or in the case of the dust, we're working on that to improve that situation. We had the trucking operation start, not quite having everything in place to remove the dust from the wheels, and they got some dust out on the street, and now we're continuing with that. We've replaced the street sweeper already once, so we're working at it and trying to get it cleaned up. So here's some pictures. This is it shows the first down there. I wasn't out there on the first; it was on the second. This is the fairway, green, and tee for hole 5. The reservoir is right here. And the Chevy Chase Country Club was out there taking as much material off as they could to stockpile or to put in other locations so they could wouldn't have to replace this material. Here's the site as of last week. From approximately the same location, the tee box is up in here as we were looking at the last slide, and this is the condition of the reservoir as of last week. And if everything works right, we'll go onto the website and I'll show you a picture taken just a few minutes ago. This is another shot on the 2nd of January of the reservoir, standing on the north side looking south across the reservoir. All the trees standing yet. On the 11th, here's a picture taking down the trees. There was some trees between the reservoir and fairway number 4 on the Chevy Chase Country Club that had to come down because that root ball that you see there is basically on the edge of the existing reservoir. Here's some eucalyptus trees that were taken down in the area of the embankment here. This is basically the edge of the reservoir right in this location here.
Well, excuse me, what do we do with those trees? Do we replant them somewhere? Or?
Yes, they were, the oak trees were taken and given to the golf course. And these trees were hauled off and will be recycled, much as they can. Here is the surface of the reservoir during the soil removing process. Here's the first day of demolition of the roof, with the jackhammer going at it, and this is the rebar. Right there is a footing. These footings that held up the roof were only setting on the floor. They were not attached to the floor. So when they started moving these, sometimes they took the footing right along with it and tipped it over. Here is a shot from the bottom of the reservoir last week. You can see here's a footing for a column with the struts in between. Same over in here. Jackhammer up on top, taking it down. This machine over here is processing the material. Hauling off the rubble. All the concrete and all the rebar will be recycled. We'll find out the actual tonnage that is been recycled. All the rebar and all is removed from the concrete right here on the site. Here is a footing. A little unclear, but you can see the struts here that were connected between the footings for each one of the columns. There's also back up in this location, and you can see them over in here. Better picture. You can see them on the TV screen better than you can on that screen there. But here's the cracks that were detected in the footings. The website that we have is you just go to the GWP website. It has a link to the Chevy Chase Reservoir. On the website we have the Chevy Chase Project, or what is the Chevy Chase Project, 3-week look-ahead schedule, which we update weekly, neighborhood meeting notices, construction update, link to on-site cameras. So let's see if we can, So here's the GWP website. Here's our little connection here to the reservoir update. Here we have the 3-week look-ahead schedule. Here's our next neighborhood meeting notice. And here's our construction camera. We have a camera on site. We may be adding another one, depends on. This one is 4:56 this afternoon. Takes a little time to bring it up. There's the site as it sets at 4:56 this afternoon. And you can zoom in and play around with this. But go back to normal view. The beauty of this program is that we can go back and look at, it's all archived. So we can go down, see what was going on this morning at this one here. There's a site as it was this morning. This machine here takes concrete and crushes it into fine powder, takes it right off the rebar. It's just a big claw to get the, so you can see the rebar sitting over here. That's cleaned. Here's the rubble that's going to be hauled off. Any questions?
I just have a quick one. I did receive a notice for the residential meeting because I live on Chevy Chase. And one of my concerns, I guess in the future when you start rebuilding the reservoir is the staging area. Do you anticipate putting a lot of trucks or material on the streets? Because during the break on one of the pipelines on Linda Vista a few years ago or last year, there was like a lot of construction going on Chevy Chase and Harvey. And they were using the bridge underpass as a staging area. So I was wondering how we're going to deal with that in the future if we do have a lot of trucks coming in and out, and where we're going to put the material before they start rebuilding the reservoir.
The requirements of the contract is they cannot stage on Chevy Chase, they cannot stage on Harvey. All trucks that come up Chevy Chase have to be flagged onto the site and cannot sit. So we're making sure the contractor has his scheduling properly, such that when the trucks arrive, they can go right onto the site. Now, we've only got one entrance right now into the site, and last week we did have one truck or two that had to stage or sit out on the street until the truck actually was able to come off the site. But contractors setting up a sort of a loop on the site, and the other thing is the concrete is coming from a local distributor here on San Fernando, and so they will schedule those so that when the concrete trucks get up there, they'll just drive onto the site. We're not allowing any staging of trucks on the site at all, or on the streets at all.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Could you comment on the expected life of the project at this point? It seems everything is on schedule. When do you anticipate being done?
The contract is for 18 months.
Yes.
To substantial completion of the reservoir and pump station, and right now we're on that schedule, but we're only less than 2 months into the schedule also. So right now he seems to be tracking very close to his schedule. Even with the rain that we've had, he has been able to keep things rolling. So
thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Last on our agenda for water was the quarterly report. I wondered if there were any questions about that report. I think a copy's been provided to each of you.
I haven't had a chance to go over it too much, but were there some highlights you'd like to point out to us?
Kind of an easy first step, Commissioner Miller, is go to page 2. There's a bit of a dashboard there, color-coded.
Yes.
And the color code system is red, green, and yellow. Red being a bad situation, green being a normal situation. So most of the graph is green. There's just a bit of yellow, and those two that are yellow are somewhat interrelated, but there's nothing to report way out of the ordinary or in what we call the red zone. In particular, by exception, the two that are yellow, unaccounted for water, we're around 8%, currently the running average. Last year, on average, we were at 9%, and the industry standard says you need to do something if you're above 10%, and our goal is at 5%. And the others that are small meter replacement program is a little bit behind schedule. Part of the reason of unaccounted for water is we have some very old water meters, and the nature of water meters is, like most things, is when they age, they get a little slower. And when they get slower, they don't report as much flow as actually is going through them. I think I've stated before the Commission before, of the 33,000 meters, over 21,000 are greater than the typical 15-year standard, and 14,000 are greater than 25 years old. So when we replace those meters, they'll account for the water better, and our unaccounted for water numbers should drop. And we have a plan in place that we'll be bringing forth to replace all 33,000 meters in about an 18-month program, including an automatic meter reading system using radio telemetry. So that's in the works as we speak.
I have a question. Please. I want to comment. There was an article in the Glendale News Press about a chromium-6 treatment or some kind of analysis. Can you provide the public with a summary and maybe an update on how that's going?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, I don't know if you've found it in the report, Commissioner Yao, but on page 4 is a summary for chromium-6. And what you probably are referring to as the last item on there is a chromium-6 removal research project and funding. And part of the reason Mr. Kavunas has gone to Washington is to make sure we're securing additional funding for this program. We have a kind of a bench-level test going on for removal of Chrome-6, hexavalent chromium, at the Glendale operating unit currently. And its preliminary results are very favorable. We're introducing chromium into an off-stream at about 100 parts per billion, and the removal we're seeing is down at the 1 part per billion range, so very effective. It's a matter of determining which of the several treatment technologies available to us is the most robust and cost-effective. One of them is more expensive to buy, less expensive to run, and the other one is less expensive to buy but more expensive to run. So those are the things we're kind of weighing there in the program. And this also gives a summary on this page of where we currently are in terms of what we're delivering, which wells are causing higher chrome numbers in general, and we try and stay away from using those wells at high rates of flow to keep the average down. We are, if I could just refer here, the last paragraph under Chrome-6 concentration refers to a point of entry rate of about 4 parts per billion, and as it goes out in the system, that number is diluted basically to 0 as it moves out through the system. The MCL for that, or the maximum contaminant load, is 50 parts per billion, so we're well below the MCL, or the legal requirement.
Is that MCL for hexavalent chromium or chromium total?
It's a good distinction, Commissioner Miller. The MCL put out by EPA and the state is for the total chromium, so it involves both hexavalent and chrome-3, the other common form of it.
Is there an action level or other public health recommended standard for hexavalent?
Not at this time. However, I would be remiss to not report that we have been given word that OHIA, the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, that's a state office, has been conducting the scientific research and will soon be issuing a draft public health goal, or PHG, for Chrome-6 specifically.
On page 3 of your report, it references the VOC removal by a monthly, it gives a monthly breakdown. Why does it vary so much from month to month? I mean, in October you have 237, in November you have 334.
There are a couple of reasons for it. There are 8 wells involved in this facility. There are kind of 2 sets of picket fences, if you will. One in the city of Glendale, 4 across, and then one actually to the south in the city of L.A. but they're essentially crossing the river basin for the LA River. And the volatiles in each of those wells varies, as does the chrome level. And depending on the blends of those 8 wells and how much we're taking from each well, it will affect what we're receiving as a waste stream coming in. And then further, we have 2 towers for treating for air and 8 vessels with granulated activated carbon for removal. And over time, the vessel will deteriorate in its performance, and eventually it has to be taken offline, the carbon taken out and replaced with new carbon. So those variables all kind of work together to produce what we're seeing there.
Thank you.
A question on page 5 in your capital improvement plan. You have the total capital improvement plan budget at $21.0 million. Is that, excuse me, is that for the current fiscal year, or is it the entire program?
That's for the current fiscal year?
Yes.
And, of course, a big chunk of that is the Chevy Chase 968 replacement program.
Right. On your water mains, I see you've got the contract awarded to J. Fletcher Kramer for $2 million, 33% below the engineer's estimate for lining and cleaning. Have we actually started any of the lining yet?
Yes. That project is underway. It started also the first part of January. And some of it actually involves the environs in the Chevy Chase Canyon. Commissioner Yao, if you've seen pipelines running down the gutters of the street, those are bypass pipelines that carry temporary water to the residents while the lines are taken out of service, cleaned, and then cement mortar lined. That phase is going on, and that part is nearing completion in the canyon. There's a second phase along the mountain corridor, approximately from Cordova to Royal, that area, and related streets, and that's also being cleaned in line as we speak.
Steel pipe or ductile iron in that area?
The existing pipe is historic pipe. It's cast iron from before the 1940s and was not lined at the time it was put in.
I'd like to recommend in the future, realizing you may not be able to do it immediately, but on this page, if you could expand the discussion of the CIP budget to whatever the projected range is. I think it's 20 years or something.
I'm not sure I quite understand how we're going to do that on this one page. There's about $220 million in that program over that 20-year period.
Okay.
Did you want to see a summary sheet for that? It's not likely to change in years 2 through...
Well, that's probably true. I'm just trying to get something more of a bird's eye view of the whole program, whereas I think this is just a snapshot for the current year.
It is. We could attach to the back of this what that outlook looks like. And
I think that might be helpful, because although it's quite some time off, I would think that your planning for that is going to determine how your financial situation is and whether it needs some recovery or something, which I think is an issue of great concern to the Commission.
As you know, we're going to be coming back in 2 years to give you kind of a point in space where what we've actually accomplished and how the picture might have changed in that time frame.
Anyway, congratulations on that contract with Kramer.
Great.
Well done.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Our next item here is on the Green Building Program, and did you have somebody to call up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Excellent.
President, Commissioners, my name is Craig Keenan, the PBC Program Coordinator. I'm here to give you a quick update on where we're at. I know you've discussed this at the last couple of meetings. Since our commission meeting, City Council had asked planning to look into this, so we've formed a committee that is planning, public works, community development, housing, and GWP. And we met last week, and they put together an outline of a commission or a City Council agenda item that they plan to bring in May or June. And I had a copy of it. I'll just go over it real quick. What this is, it's basically going to look at what other cities are doing, explain what LEED is and green building certification, look at what other cities are doing, what Glendale's doing, come up with some policy alternatives. Some cities like Pasadena require municipal buildings and private new construction of a certain size to meet LEED requirements. Other cities, it's voluntary. Other cities, it's a combination. So they're going to look at those various different things. And then there would be a summary of what they found out and some recommendations. Not clear on what those recommendations would be. And separate from that, we've been looking at what we might be able to do in GWP that would be separate from or enhance what this committee is doing. And one of the things we're looking at is a PBC program that could support green buildings, similar to what Pasadena, Burbank, Anaheim already do. They provide incentives for LEED certification of various levels. They're pretty standard. It's anywhere from $15,000 to $30,000 depending on the level, silver, gold, platinum. They provide some incentives for other green building certifications for residential and some technical incentives. Plus, we already have 10, 15 programs that provide incentives that could be used to support a green building program. So I've put together a draft of a program that we'll present to you as part of our PBC program package, hopefully next month, that will combine all these things into one place. Because we also have access to water conservation incentives and programs through MWD, a whole range of them. So there's a lot of things we are doing. It's just not in one place where somebody could see it. Basically, that's where we're at.
Okay.
Questions?
Yeah, I just have a question, maybe relating to green buildings, but how are we doing on the solar program? Since
Well,
we talked about
it passed February 12th. We're putting together a marketing campaign to go out to mainly our large business customers first, because they don't know we have a program. Our residential program is doing really good. We've spent $300,000 just on residential program or residential installations in just this past 6 months. So we've had some inquiries on the large business. You know, it's just been a few weeks. They do like our incentive better than they get from Edison, so that's a good sign. But we haven't had any concrete reservations yet. But we're pretty optimistic that once we get the word out there, it'll start happening.
So we expect maybe at the next meeting you would have a general proposal for a program.
At the next meeting, what I hope to bring you is every 2 years we put together a PBC program,
Right.
budget and plan. That's what I would hope to bring you at the next meeting, and it would include the green building, and our other program. We have about 25 programs.
Isn't there a way you can maybe consolidate that list like you mentioned and post it online so all the residents can see it and see what kind of PBC programs the city has that they might be interested in?
Yes, and that's what this green building program will do, is if you're interested in green building, it will cover technical assistance, all the kinds of incentives and programs we have for single-family homes, and list the incentives, where they go to sign up. We'll have incentives for multifamily and affordable housing. It'll be listed in here what they are, how they can apply. Same thing for large buildings and municipal buildings. So that's the purpose of the green building program. Will be more of an umbrella program. It'll have some specific incentives attached to it, but it'll be more of an umbrella program to let people know what resources are available. And we'll have it on the website in addition to what we already have there.
Yeah, because I've been looking through the website, and it seems like you have to go to different places to look at different programs, the solar program,
Right.
the audit program, or whatever program we have, and it would be nice to have maybe one link to all the programs so they see a snapshot of everything.
We'll be doing that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any other questions? One last thing. You'll be mailing us in advance a copy of the proposal before we actually have the meeting?
Yes, because it's already 66 pages long, just the PBC program. So we'll
I think we'll need some time to get through it.
We'll give you a few weeks.
Okay, all right. Thank you kindly. Let's see, that completes all of your reports, right? Our next item here is the oral communications. Do we have any oral communications? None. Old business. Is there any old business? No old business. Any new business?
Well, I just have one mention. Is this Interim Director Dan Wallace's last day, or is he going to be back again?
No, we're not going to let him off the hook that easy. No, Dan's going to be here for a little while. There's a few things that we'd like him to cover for us, so we'll keep him here for another 5 years or so. But no, no, but he is going to stay on a temporary basis. Yes.
Well, we certainly hope he'll stay on long enough so we can honor him for the work he's done.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Dan. In anticipation of that, agenda forecast. Any items you would like to bring up?
One item that I'd like to hear a little bit about is the Chromium-6. I think when I first came on the commission, they gave a report about it, but I've learned a lot in the last year and a half, so it might be helpful to have some kind of update as to what the problems are, the pitfalls, where we're at with it, how we're addressing it, whether it be next month or the month after. It's just something I want to keep online or out there.
If I could chime into that, the groundwater quality issues are actually rather complex in the basin. You've got volatile organic compounds as well as, I think, the rocket formula material and things like that, and perhaps you could just talk about all of that. Yeah, okay, thank you. Other items? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. In the next few meetings, I would like to see, at least for immediate future, because the summer is approaching pretty soon, I would like to see some kind of a summer electric outlook and preparedness, maybe look at in terms of electricity supply and demand and our adequacy to serve our residents, and what our projected forecast is that Ramon mentioned earlier. We do scenario analysis, so I'd like to get some clarification and maybe someone to discuss that issue, that we won't have any issues when the summer approaches. But we do have a sustained heat wave, that we are prepared to deal with that. So just so that maybe in the next meeting we can talk about electric forecasts and demand outlook, and maybe in May we can talk about our resource adequacy and what we're doing to make sure the lights stay on in the summer.
I had a note down here about power supply and demand, which you had mentioned earlier. That basically covers the same issue. You elaborated on it more comprehensively there. Other issues? I don't know if you're quite ready for it yet, but I think we had a quarterly report a meeting or two ago on customer services, and when you have the next one ready, you had a number of action plans that you indicated were needed and would be helpful to hear about that. And with the water supply issue being a little bit more of a problem now than it has been in previous years, even though we've had a little bit of relief from snowfall up north, I think it would be helpful to talk about recycled water. I think you had a recycled water plan that was distributed to us, and it might be helpful to revisit what the next steps of that are. And one last item, I understand MWD is talking about increasing rates. I think it might be helpful to hear about that. That's all I've got. Any other items on agenda forecast? If not, then do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Thank you very much. The meeting is hereby adjourned. The date and place of the next meeting will be April 7th, 2008 at 4 p.m. in council chambers. Thank you and have a good night.